I want to talk to you today about three things that happened this week that tell you exactly where this country and the entire Western world is headed if conservatives do not get off the couch and start fighting back like they mean it. England, Los Angeles, New York City, three stories, one ideology, one agenda, one body count, and if you are not furious after this video, you are either not paying attention or you have already given up, and I do not have time for either. England. An 18-year-old boy bled to death while the police worried about their diversity score. His name was Henry Nowak, 18 years old, finance student, walking home from a night out with friends in Southampton, England on December 3, 2025. A man named Vikram Digwa put a knife into him 5 times. 5 times. The blade went into his chest. He had massive internal bleeding. He was dying on the street. And when the police arrived, the officers who are paid by the British taxpayer to protect British citizens, they handcuffed the boy who had just been stabbed. They handcuffed the victim, the dying 18-year-old boy. They handcuffed him and left him on the ground while his killer stood nearby, because the killer had told them he was the victim of a racist attack, because the man who had just driven a knife into a teenager's chest 5 times claimed that the teenager had grabbed his turban and called him names, and the officers believed him. Or more accurately, and this is the part that should make every American's blood boil, the officers were so thoroughly conditioned by years of diversity training, anti-racism indoctrination, institutional political correctness, and the career-ending consequences of being labeled a racist in modern Britain that they took the word of the man holding the bloody knife over the word of the boy bleeding out on the pavement. There is video. The police released it after Digwa was convicted. In the video, you can hear Henry Nowak telling the officers he has been stabbed, telling them he is dying, begging them, and you can hear the officer's response. "Don't think you have, mate. Don't think you have, mate." An 18-year-old boy is bleeding internally from 5 stab wounds, and a British police officer tells him he does not think he has been stabbed because seeing what was in front of him would have required him to act on what was in front of him, and acting on what was in front of him would have required him to treat a minority man claiming racism as a suspect rather than a victim, and in modern Britain that is a career-ending act, so Henry Nowak died. He died on a street in Southampton, England in December 2025 because the communist left, and yes, I am calling it what it is, has so thoroughly captured the institutions of British society that a police officer's first calculation at a crime scene is not who is the victim and who is the perpetrator. It is which version of events creates less political risk for me personally. That is not a police officer. That is a political operative with a badge. And that transformation, from protector of the innocent to enforcer of ideological compliance, is exactly what the communist left does to every institution it captures. It happened to the British police force. It is happening to American police departments in every major city run by Democrats. It is happening to the military. It is happening to the schools. It is happening to the hospitals. It is happening to the courts. The Communist Project does not announce itself. It does not march in with tanks and flags. It infiltrates. It indoctrinates. It installs ideological loyalists in positions of institutional authority. It changes the incentive structures so that ideological compliance is rewarded and independent thought is punished. And then, one day, a boy is bleeding on the street, and the police officer's first thought is not, "How do I save this boy?" It is, "How do I avoid being called a racist?" Henry Nowak is dead because of that process. He is dead because the communists won the British institutions, and they are playing the same game here. The Democratic Party is the Communist Party with better branding. I am going to say something that the controlled opposition media, including most of what passes for conservative media in this country, does not have the spine to say plainly. The Democratic Party of the United States in 2026 is a communist party. It is a socialist and communist coalition operating under a brand name that still carries the residual trust built up over generations by a party that bore no resemblance to what now operates under that name. Socialism and communism are not two different things. They are 2 points on the same road to the same destination. Socialism is what the communists call the transitional phase, the period during which they are dismantling the existing capitalist order and building the mechanisms of state control that full communism requires. Every communist revolution in history passed through a socialist phase, every single one. The Bolsheviks were socialists before they were communists. Mao's China was a socialist republic before it was the People's Republic. Castro's Cuba was a socialist revolution before it became a communist dictatorship. The Democratic Socialists of America, whose members now sit in the United States Congress, in state legislatures, and in city halls across the country, are not a fringe. They are the future of the Democratic Party. They put it in the name. They are not embarrassed about it. They ran a candidate for mayor of the largest city in the United States, and they won. The Squad, the congressional bloc of open socialists led by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her allies, has advocated for the abolition of immigration and customs enforcement, the defunding of police departments, the federal government takeover of healthcare, a multi-trillion-dollar federal control of the entire energy economy, the cancellation of student debt accumulated by individuals making personal choices, funded by taxpayers who made different choices, and open borders that have produced the documented catastrophic consequences that every serious border security analyst predicted they would produce. These are not progressive modifications of a free market system. These are the first moves of a communist transformation, the systematic expansion of state power, the systematic dismantling of individual economic freedom, and the systematic creation of a dependent population that cannot sustain itself without the state and therefore cannot resist the state. I have been to the countries where this ideology ran long enough to reach its conclusion. I have seen the end state. The Soviet Union produced it, Cuba produced it, Venezuela produced it, North Korea produced it, China produced it. Every country that traveled far enough down the socialist road arrived at the same destination. A small ruling class with absolute power, a large population with no rights, an economy that cannot feed its people, and a security apparatus whose function is suppressing the population that the ideology claimed to be liberating. The conservative who points this out is called extreme, is called paranoid, is accused of seeing communists under every bed. I have been to the beds. I know what is under them. And I am telling you, when what is happening in the Democratic Party of the United States right now is not a drift toward the center left, it is a march toward the same destination that March has always reached. Henry Nowak handcuffed on a British street is 1 mile marker on that road. Los Angeles is another. New York City is another. Karen Bass, the communist who let Los Angeles burn. Karen Bass is the mayor of Los Angeles. She has held that office since 2022. She is a product of the hard left of the Democratic Party, a party that even the Democratic establishment considered too radical during her congressional career. She has spent her political life advocating for the expansion of government power, the reduction of law enforcement capability, and the systematic implementation of the progressive communist policy agenda in one of the most important cities in the United States. In January 2025, the Pacific Palisades Fire, the most destructive wildfire in the history of Los Angeles, tore through the city. It killed 12 people. It destroyed thousands of homes. It caused billions of dollars in damage to a city that was already on its knees from years of progressive misgovernance. Where was Karen Bass when the fire started? She was in Ghana, on a government trip to Africa, while the city she was elected to lead burned. She had reduced the Los Angeles Fire Department budget. She had cut the resources dedicated to fire prevention and firefighting in a city that sits in one of the most fire-prone environments on the North American continent, a city that every fire expert, every fire department professional, and every person who has lived in Southern California for more than 5 minutes knows is one drought and one Santa Ana wind event away from catastrophic wildfire. She cut the budget, she got on a plane to Africa, and the fire came. She flew back, she held press conferences, she walked through the rubble in her carefully selected disaster-appropriate clothing and expressed concern for the people whose homes had burned. And then, when the Los Angeles Fire Department produced an internal after-action report documenting the specific failures of her administration in preparing for and responding to the fire, she pressured the fire chief to change the report. The Los Angeles Times documented it. The after-action report was, in the newspaper's words, massaged in what amounted to an effort to downplay the failures of city and fire department leadership. Bass told the interim fire chief the report could expose the city to legal liabilities for those failures. She tried to bury the evidence of her own incompetence while people were still displaced from their homes, while families were still sorting through the ashes of everything they had spent their lives building, while 12 people were dead. This is who she is. This is what she does. And 3 in 5 Los Angeles voters want her gone, and she is still advancing to the November runoff because the communist machine in California does not answer to the voters. It answers to the ideology. It answers to the unions. It answers to the donor class that funds the progressive project, and that machine will grind forward regardless of the human wreckage it leaves in its wake. Los Angeles has the worst homelessness crisis of any major American city. Its streets in large areas are controlled by addiction, mental illness, and the consequences of policies that have systematically dismantled law enforcement capability and criminal accountability in the name of social justice. Major corporations are leaving downtown. The entertainment industry that built the city's economy is hollowed out. The schools are failing. The infrastructure is crumbling. And Karen Bass is running for re-election. Because in a city run by communists, for long enough, even catastrophic failure does not produce accountability. It produces a runoff. New York City, from corruption to communism in one election cycle. Eric Adams was the mayor of New York City. He declared himself, I am not making this up, the future of the Democratic Party. He was going to be the next Barack Obama, the next great rising star of urban Democratic politics. Then the FBI raided his house at 6 in the morning. Federal agents descended on Gracie Mansion, the official residence of the mayor of the largest city in the United States, at dawn. Adams was indicted on federal charges of bribery, fraud, and soliciting illegal foreign campaign donations. Prosecutors alleged he had taken over $100,000 in illegal personal benefits. The specific allegations included taking bribes from the Turkish government in exchange for favorable treatment of a Turkish diplomatic building's fire safety approvals, meaning the mayor of New York City was allegedly taking money from a foreign government to influence city decisions. He became the first sitting mayor in New York City history to be criminally charged while in office. His approval rating collapsed to 26%. 69% of New Yorkers said he should resign. 80% of fellow Democrats said he should not run for re-election. The charges were eventually dismissed. Dismissed after Adams cooperated with the Trump administration's immigration enforcement efforts, a transaction that even his allies acknowledged looked exactly like what it appeared to be. The corruption charges went away in exchange for political cooperation. The indicted mayor who had taken foreign bribes was more useful as an immigration enforcement ally than as a prosecuted criminal. He suspended his re-election campaign anyway. He was polling in the single digits. The future of the Democratic Party was done, and New York City, the largest, most consequential, most economically powerful city in the United States, replaced him with a Democratic socialist. Zohran Mamdani, a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America, a man who has been explicit, unapologetic, and consistent about his socialist agenda, a man who wants to expand the role of the state in the New York City economy, who supports policies that are indistinguishable from the policies of socialist governments, who won the mayoralty of New York City in 2025. The Communist Project in America just won the mayor's office in New York City. Not a progressive, not a moderate liberal, a self-identified democratic socialist, which is to say a communist who has read enough history to know that calling yourself a communist makes the transition harder. This is the trajectory. This is what the Democratic Party becomes when its corruption is exposed and the voters move. They do not move toward the center. They do not move toward the conservative governance that has a documented record of producing better outcomes for actual human beings. They move further left. They elect the communist because at least the communist is honest about what he is. What this means for you, England, Los Angeles, New York City, a boy handcuffed to death by officers more afraid of a racism accusation than of a dying teenager, a city burned by a mayor who was in Africa and who tried to hide the evidence of her failures, the largest city in America electing an open socialist to replace a corrupt Democrat. These are not separate stories. They are chapters in the same book. They are the predictable and documented consequences of the same ideology operating in different contexts and at different stages of implementation. In England, the ideology has captured the police so thoroughly that officers will let a boy die to avoid ideological risk. In Los Angeles, the ideology has run the city long enough to hollow out its institutions, destroy its fiscal integrity, and produce a mayor who cuts fire department budgets and flees to Africa. In New York City, the ideology has moved past the corrupt moderate phase and into the open socialist phase, the phase that historically precedes the communist phase. The conservative who is waiting for the self-evident failure of progressive communist governance to produce political change on its own is going to be waiting forever. Because the institutions that should be producing accountability, the media, the judiciary, the educational system, the administrative state, have been captured by the same ideology whose failures they should be exposing. Captured institutions do not hold the ideology accountable, they protect it. The only accountability that matters is the accountability that the conservative movement creates through political power, through community organization, through the building of parallel institutions that operate outside the captured ones, and through the uncompromising willingness to name the ideology for what it is, communist, and to fight it accordingly. I spent my career in uniform defending this country against its enemies, foreign and domestic. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States. That oath does not expire. The enemies of this republic are not just foreign. They are here. They are in the city halls. They are in the school boards. They are in the police training academies teaching officers that the calculation at a crime scene is political rather than protective. They are in the mayor's office in New York City. They are in the mayor's office in Los Angeles, trying to hide the evidence of their failures from the people who died because of them. Name them. Fight them. Build the community and the capability that makes you independent of the systems they control. Prepare, train, organize. The communist project depends on a population that is isolated, dependent, and unable to sustain itself without the systems the communists control. Be none of those things. Enroll in the Total Preparedness Program at tpp.suburbanprepper.com and build the capability that makes you and your community genuinely free. Free from dependence on the institutions that are failing you, free from the vulnerability that makes people easy to control, and free to defend the republic that generations of Americans bled and died to build and preserve. This is survival. This is resilience. This is preparedness.